Welcome to Module 1, the story behind stress and food. So as we go through these modules, I want you to be really aware that sometimes we're blaming stress, or we're blaming food, or we're blaming ourselves. But there's more that goes into the story. There's more behind the scenes than we're necessarily seeing. So one of those things is that our brain looks for patterns and acts on those patterns. So for example, our brain prefers to use patterns when it needs to work in an efficient way, which is almost all the time. Our brain is basically a computer that's built for survival and saving energy. And so it's going to look for these patterns and look for things in your environment that trigger those patterns. And then it'll just follow the pattern. So this works really well for when you wake up in the morning and you put your pants on and you put your shoes on, you put your socks on first, you put your shoes on. None of that is stuff that you necessarily think about. It's all geared towards getting ready. And because you think, well, I have to leave for work today, all of those other things fall into a pattern before you leave for the day, hopefully. Hopefully we have pants on. So that's how our brain groups together those individual things to create a pattern so that we don't have to think of things every single time we do them. If you can imagine how much energy it would take if every time you got ready for the day, you had to decide what you do first. You had to think, first I put my socks on, then I put my shoes on. Oh, I forgot my pants. Now I have to go all the way back and start over. That would take a huge amount of energy. And so our brains skip all of that. And instead, they just group it all together. So when we're talking about stress and food, if what we've always done, if what we've always seen is eat because we're stressed, or this comforting food helps when we're stressed, our brains will automatically create that pattern ahead of time. We also, when we're stressed, our brains are wanting to run on autopilot even more because they're using a lot of energy, usually to navigate a whole lot of situations. Typically when we're stressed, it's because there's a lot going on that's maybe outside our control, or there's a lot that we can't predict happening. So we have to make a lot of decisions. Decisions take energy. And so our brains, in their infinite wisdom, to conserve energy, start running on autopilot where they can. And if they know that typically you reach for chips when you get home at the end of a busy day, that's going to be the pattern that they allow to follow because it's autopilot and it's easy. It doesn't have anything to do with laziness. It doesn't have anything to do with willpower. It's just how our brains are made to be. And our brains haven't changed in probably the last 10,000-ish years. So they don't prioritize the same things that we have created our society to prioritize. And so we end up shaming and shoulding ourselves for things that are actually just a product of our brains trying to conserve energy when we're stressed. So understanding that those patterns that we have created in the past are going to be difficult to break, which does not by any means mean they're like impossible to break. They're fully possible to break. You can absolutely break any pattern. It's just going to take a little bit of effort and relying on yourself when you are in moments of heightened stress or exhaustion to change a pattern isn't really a great way to approach it because it's just going to be that much harder. Your brain is going to fight you because it's going to say, no, we don't have energy to devote to creating a new pattern for our stress here. What we're going to do is what we've always done. And that's what's easy and that's what we'll do. So you'll feel as if you're fighting yourself. This is compounded by how in society we generally talk about how our brain is sabotaging us, or when we're trying to eat a certain way, we are sabotaging ourselves. We don't want ourselves to be successful, that kind of thing, which is not at all true. Your brain is never sabotaging you and your body is never sabotaging you. They just don't know what you want because they are made to survive and conserve energy, and not necessarily made in the ways of morality with food and not wanting to eat comfort food because you feel bad about that because society has made us feel bad about it. They're not primed for that. They're primed for survival. So what we have to do is meet our brain and body where they are and make things a little bit easier on ourselves so that we're not just throwing ourselves into these cycles of guilt and should and shame. The other part of this is that typically when we're stressed, it's because we're busy. Usually if we have plenty of time during the day and we're doing whatever we want, and there's like, a lot of ease, that's not necessarily when we feel stress. So knowing that typically when we have times of stress, we don't have as much time during the day, we tend not to eat as much during the day. So we might be working through breaks, we might be working through lunch, we are eating kind of irregularly, we might be flying right out the door without having breakfast. And so sometimes at the end of the day, when we think we're stress eating, it's really a physiologic need to eat because we've skipped eating all day. So something to really keep in mind when you're coming into a busy period is how you can easily get food in during the day. Even if it's not meals and you're just getting snacks in, protein shakes, protein bars, anything that can get is kind of calorie dense that will help you through the day and keep you somewhat sustained. Those are really important things to look for. There are tons of things in the stores now that they have microwavable oatmeal and all kinds of things that are easy made. And that's what you want to aim for when you're coming into a busy period of time. Because when we're not eating during the day, our bodies will make up what we use during the day at the end of the day. When we're busy, typically and stressed, our digestive system, our hunger is downregulated. So we don't actually feel hungry because stress is going to amplify the other areas of our body that need to we need to keep moving. We need to keep our brain focused. We need to keep, so it'll kind of deregulate or downregulate your digestion. So you won't feel hungry until the end of the day when you're getting home and you've calmed down a little bit. All of that hunger will hit all at once, which can be incredibly overwhelming and feel or look like stress eating because you just can't stop eating. But actually, it's a combination of potential eating for comfort and then also the fact that you're going to be hungry, or you're going to be hungry because you haven't eaten all day. So that combination ends in something that's typically ends up being a lot more food at the end of the day. Again, if we respond to that with shame and guilt rather than asking ourselves how we can help ourselves out, usually that turns out to be even more stressful because shame and guilt then trigger the stress system all over again. So what we need to look at is how do we help ourselves so that we can have the results we want without shaming ourselves or shoulding ourselves. You're a human being, a biological organism. And as such, you require food and your brain works in patterns. So it's incredibly important to understand those patterns and know that you're going to work within them. You can't break them. You can't create all new rules for your brain and body to work off of, but you can work within the rules. And that's exactly what we're going to try to do here. The other thing is it's going to be much harder at the end of the day to, let's say, if you have a snack or something, to have the right choice when the wrong choice is a little bit easier. We also want to try to stay away from right and wrong choices, but the choice that you'd rather have. If the choice you would not rather have is easier than the choice you'd rather have, let's say the choice you don't want is the whole bag of chips and the choice you do want is an apple. If the apple is whole and in the fridge and the chips are out on the counter or easily accessible and you just open the bag and eat, your brain is going to go for the easiest option. It wants to get the calories and it wants to get them in now. And so those are going to be things where your brain ends up choosing the easier option rather than the thing that's going to take a little bit more energy out of you. So when you're looking at the end of the day and what you would rather eat when you have stress eating patterns, try not to go for the complete opposite of what you would typically eat. If what you would typically eat is a pint of ice cream, don't say you're going to have this bag of celery sticks. That's too far from your typical pattern. Choose something that's in between. or have that ice cream already measured out and a certain amount that you'd rather eat, or a lighter calorie ice cream that you can mix in. Things like that are going to help you work your way towards a pattern that you would rather build than just saying, instead, I'm going to completely take away my typical pattern and I'm going to create a whole new one today in the middle of my stress. That's going to take a ton of energy, and your brain is going to decide not to devote energy to it. So you're going to feel miserable. When things feel hard and sticky, miserable and unmotivating, that's because we generally are working against our brains. So giving yourself a little bit of a reward for making it through that stressful day, while also choosing something that is in line with your goals, is going to be much better in the long term.